Hi everyone, welcome to the second show of We Mean Business. I am very excited to say that joining me on this week's show is the wonderful Sarah Lord from the Personal Finance Society. Hi Sarah, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So, for anyone who doesn't know Sarah, she is the current president of the Personal Finance Society. She is one of the highest qualified financial planners in the UK and has been a director at a number of firms over the past 20 years. So, to start things off, Sarah, instead of sort of talking about what do you do now, we like to start with why do you do what you do now?
I think it's very simple. I mean, I, like many, 20 years ago, fell into the profession, but absolutely loved what I saw. And so as I've gone through my career, I've become even more passionate about helping clients, have financial resilience, helping them have the confidence to live the life that they want to live. But in doing that, really focus on the client experience, but also bringing through financial planners to be able to help clients. For me, it's all about what we do as a profession and how we enable people and empower people to be confident in their financial future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone falls into the profession, don't they? Everyone I speak to, no one ever says, I always wanted to be a financial planner or a financial advisor. They always say, oh, I just fell into it. It just happened. Um, Amazing. So what were some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome as a young woman in financial planning?
Well, I think, as I said, I fell into the profession. My degree is in medical biochemistry, so totally unrelated. And, that was 20 years ago. And I think, if I think back to kind of the first early days of my career, the challenges were really around the fact that there were no distinct career pathways. It was very much of if you got your FP1, 2, and 3, which is probably qualifications that mean absolutely nothing to a lot of people these days, then you could become a financial advisor. And for me, my first job I took, it came from basically giving a business that was starting up in Nottingham, which is my hometown, a call and seeing whether they had any jobs. And I worked as an administrator and got my FP1, 2, and 3. And I recognised quite early on that I really liked what I saw, but I needed to find a route through so that I could kind of be the best I could be. So I moved quite quickly to a provider, and I worked at Scotech. And, at that time, providers were fantastic for providing training and knowledge and supporting and giving clear pathways. So for me, that was the best way for me to try and start navigating my early career. But the challenges part of that was I was one of very few female consultants, and so it was a baptism of fire, really, in that environment, which I suppose was quite sales oriented as well, and just learning to have the confidence in myself in what I believed was the right way to approach business, rather than how maybe the stereotype way of approaching business historically. I'm going back 20 years. And I
Yeah.
think for me, the biggest challenge, rather than necessarily looking at individual challenges, because I personally like to think that when I find something challenging or it is a challenge, there is always something I can learn from it. But I think the biggest challenge overall that I've experienced over the last 20 years, and I'm sure many listeners also feel that they experience it, is actually people's human biases, which drives stereotypical behaviour, shall we say. And typically, our profession has historically been predominantly male. and therefore as a female that represents challenges in so many different ways. And so for me it's been about the culture and navigating that culture rather than necessarily the individual challenges themselves.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think, like you said, most of the people listening, I think, have probably had one of those moments where they've stood there and they've been maybe the only woman in the room or one of very few. And yeah, no, absolutely, I definitely agree. So on the flip side of that, looking at what have been the biggest rewards throughout your career so far, what would you say?
There's many. Just as like I've said, there's been many challenges. I think there's been many sort of milestones and rewards along the way. So, doing my qualifications and passing like each exam, that's an individual milestone in itself. So, I found that rewarding. I think as far as kind of my overall career, because I've had a really varied career, I think for me one of the biggest memories and what I'd say kind of for personal fulfillment and achievement was the time I spent in the Middle East. It was exposure to a very different market, which was hugely, and it still is to a certain extent, commission driven. Never heard of RDR, for example, over in the Middle East. And actually to navigate my way as a female in a massively male dominated, culturally the Middle East is very male focused, and actually be able to come through and demonstrate the value of financial planning, the value of transparency around fees, and actually some of the clients that I worked with from the Middle East are still clients today. So that for me was a hugely rewarding experience, and it also gave me exposure to different cultures, different approaches, which we can always be learning from our experiences. So that was a big moment. And I think also 4.5 years ago, joining the board of the PFS as a member director, that for me was quite a big moment. In fact, it was a very big moment because I'd actually applied the year before. And I'd applied the year before and I had been shortlisted for interview. The interview, and when I'd applied, I kind of thought, I might as well, but I don't think I'll get anywhere. And I'd been shortlisted for interview, and the interview was 3 weeks after I had given birth to my son. And I was like, what am I meant to do?
Yeah.
So up in London. So I did it. I turned up at the interview, but it's fair to say that I didn't necessarily give my best performance for sleepless nights and a 3-week-old.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so then when there was an opportunity the following year, I decided to apply again. And so that I think that's an element of me and my career as well, is I don't kind of give up and I do persevere. So that was a big personal moment for me in joining the board of the PFS. And then I think the other aspect that I think is really important as far as rewards is actually the enjoyment and the pleasure that I get from seeing individual team members succeed and be the best that they can be. When I started out in the profession, there was, as I said earlier, there was this sort of belief that if you had your FP 1, 2, and 3, then you could be an advisor. And actually, we all know that that is not true. There is so much more that goes with it around soft skills and knowledge and conversation with clients and confidence to hold those meetings. And so along the way, I've worked with graduate programs, I've worked with training, bringing trainees through. And for me, seeing those individuals now, looking back that I maybe worked with 10 years ago, being very successful in their individual ways, I find hugely rewarding because, as I said at the start, it's about how we all come together to empower society and our clients to have the confidence around their money.
Yeah, amazing. Well, if that doesn't motivate people, then I don't know what will. That's so nice to hear. So you talked a bit about what it was like going back when you first entered the industry and sort of the bits that were tough. So what do you think are maybe the modern challenges for women entering the industry now?
Um, I, th- I think there's been a lot of change from 20 years ago. And I think because there's been change in society and, there's initiatives that the government have driven and there's other aspects, around women in finance, for example, or gender pay gap and those diversity measures. So I do think we've seen positive steps forward anyway. But I do still think that sadly, a lot of the stereotypes still do exist in pockets, in different businesses, different cultures, and so I think that's one of the key aspects that and we have to recognise that we all grow up in different environments. We all come from different cultures, backgrounds, and therefore we do have kind of our own beliefs and behaviours. But I think there needs to be a bit more recognition, for example, of the way in which we as females may look to do business with our clients or engage with our clients or have empathy with our clients would be different to that of kind of the typical male approach. And neither is right nor wrong. It's about getting that right balance of the culture and people feeling that they've got a voice and they're understood. So for me, I think that's kind of one of the biggest challenges. And actually, I've had the opportunity to work in some great businesses with fantastic culture. I've also had experiences where culture's maybe not as strong as it could be. And I think it's really important that actually women looking for careers in our profession and some of the challenges is about truly understanding the culture of the businesses that you're working in. And there is no shame, there is no right or wrong. You have every right to ask an interview or during the process around the culture, because culture can make or break kind of how you feel, how you engage, and actually ultimately how good you become. So I think for me that's it in a nutshell. There's so many multifaceted layers to that, but it's very much around sort of breaking down those biases and those stereotypes. And actually, one thing is that I'd like people to kind of take away from this is actually to have the confidence in the way in which you do business and the way in which you believe it's right to engage to do business. Early in my career, there was a suggestion that actually to sort a couple of things out, really in the way for me to do business was to go out for long lunches and to take people to the pub. That's not my style. I'm not a particularly big drinker for a start. So, that environment, it just wouldn't work for me. And it's about having the confidence in your own beliefs as to kind of what is right and what is wrong, and therefore how you fit into a culture to be the very best that you can be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point that you made about asking about the culture in the interview. I know I've probably never asked that question before. And in hindsight, if I would have asked it, it would have really been interesting what the outcome was and what I thought, and if it maybe changed my sort of perspective on the role that I was maybe taking up. So I think for people to ask that question is a really, really good idea. So we talked about you've seen a lot of companies that have great culture and good things are happening. What are you most excited to see from financial planners in the next decade?
I think it's about, for me, it's about how we transition the profession. And my theme for the year as president is around the strength and sustainability of our profession. And for me, one of the biggest things around that is how we are encouraging the next generation of planners, but importantly, the next generation of clients too. So how we adapt business models, focus on the client. The pandemic over the last 12 months has driven the use of technology, but I think we've still got a long way to go as a profession to create that harmony between technology and personal relationships, and taking kind of a digital first strategy, but still having that personalization for the client and empowering them through the use of technology, so that you can then have those really rich conversations when you're sitting down with the client. And, you know, as I say, credit to us as a profession and all the great businesses, because we've really adapted over the last 12 months. There is a real belief that, you know, our sector is a growth sector for the next 5 to 10 years, because society has realized they need advice around their finances. And if we can also take ways in which we can use technology to help bridge that advice gap as well, I think that would be really, really powerful. And I would love to see, you know, as I say, for me, it's about us focusing on how we move to the next generation of clients, because I think there's actually quite a lot of cynics out there that there's no money in it. They haven't got the assets. Well, you know, the baby boomer clients that are the typical clients of today, they didn't have money 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But by working with their financial advisor, they've created that wealth and that confidence. The difference is we've got different solutions to meet the needs. We haven't got endowments. We haven't got maximum savings plans. We've got technology and saving solutions and hugely talented financial planners that can help people on that journey.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a bit, when people start to realise how amazing a financial planner can be to their life, the difference it can make in very small ways, in very big ways, I think, yeah, I can definitely see the boom happening. So how do you think, well, what can be done, do you think, to encourage more women into financial planning? Because it's a well-known fact that obviously there is a lot more men than there is women, which is just the way it is and has been for a long time. But I think there is more women coming into the profession, but maybe what could be done to bring more women in?
Yeah, and I think it's I think we're at kind of an interesting pivotal point, to be honest, because I do think my beliefs are around the you know, the changes that we've seen in working practice and how we've had to work over the last 12 months can only be a positive for kind of the way in which we go forward together as a profession. Because, you know, going back to some of the challenges I've experienced in the past, that I've experienced where I wanted to work from home many years ago, where it really wasn't, I suppose, culturally what was accepted practice, to focus on getting a client report done. But there was people's biases and stereotypes thinking that actually I was just sitting there, I was doing daycare or childcare for the children. And I think, you know, we've clearly demonstrated that actually, no, women are serious about having careers and can balance it. And it's not just about women balancing it. There's so many dual income earners in families these days. And it is about recognising, actually, it's about flexibility that people want. And we need to be able to demonstrate that flexibility on all levels that enables people to do the roles that they want to do. And I think it is that focus around the flexibility. I think also we are seeing more come in because there are better career pathway definitions than there maybe has in the past. And we are seeing certainly more individuals or females in the role of paraplanners. But I really, you know, one message, I suppose, from today is that, you know, if you're a female sitting in a paraplanning role or administrator role, but actually really want to be a financial planner, go for it, because you can. It's not that paraplanning is becoming the female sort of environment, shall we say. We need to get a right blend across the profession of females being confident in the role of a financial planner. And I think a lot of that is we've made some great, you know, there's great initiatives around mentoring and everything. But I think we still need to see more, because there's an imbalance. There are far more male financial planners and financial advisors than there are female. And so there isn't necessarily the right balance for aspiring female financial planners to see how they can progress. As a profession, kind of all firms and all businesses, I think we have a responsibility to, not just to females, but to demonstrate what a great profession it is, and kind of how we can work with people. And in doing so, hopefully that demonstrates to females that it isn't a sales culture that it, was maybe once known for. 20 years ago when I joined, there was very much the typical talk about financial advice, and it was like, oh yeah, the man from the proof was kind of the sort of conception, or the views.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've absolutely moved on from there.
Yeah.
But we still got to do more.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more with the paraplanner going for an advisor role. I've been that paraplanner, sat in a paraplanning role and thought, I do want to be an advisor. It's scary. It was really scary, but I always wanted to speak to people, when I wanted to take the skills that I'd learned from being a paraplanner and use them as an advisor. And it was the best decision I made. And it might have been scary, but I would definitely echo that. Just go for it, because you can definitely be an advisor, a planner, and it's not the guy from the Peru anymore. It's very, very different.
And I think that's the thing as well, is also naturally females tend to be less confident than males, shall we say, particularly in the workplace. And I think it's about having that confidence in yourself. There will of course be moments where you're like, oh, what am I doing? I can't do it. Yeah. But have that confidence. That's been one of the things throughout my career, is I have always been quite focused, or very focused, on kind of what I personally want to achieve, but also how I want to help my clients. But that has also been driven by my confidence. And I know it's easy for me to say that. Some people are probably listening thinking, we've been doing it for 20 years. Of course you've got confidence. But, I even had a degree of confidence early on. And confidence doesn't mean arrogance. It just means having a degree of self-belief. And I think a lot of women that I come across in our profession lack that self-belief. And I really would encourage everybody to believe in yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what I've done to try and build my confidence, because I've 100% sat there and been like, oh, I can't do this. This is really scary. It's just gone for it. Just not thought about what could happen, what could go wrong. Just gone for it. And then when you've done it and it's been fine, it's good, it's great, you've really enjoyed it, you're like, oh, I can do that. I'm fine. This hasn't all gone the wrong way. It's absolutely fine. Then you do that again and you do it again, and time you've done it a few times, you think, oh, I can do this now. I'm fine. I'm not nervous. I've got this.
Absolutely. Yeah, and nerves are healthy to that point. Nerves are healthy to a certain extent. But absolutely, I have always taken the view of, what's the worst that can happen? I look like an idiot, but it will be for 10 minutes of my life, or half an hour, or an hour. Yeah. And people might be thinking, well, what's she talking about now? But, what's the worst that can happen? Unless you go out and you try it. And, I'd always encourage trying in a safe environment first. But unless you go out and try it, you are never going to know.
Definitely. So what are you and the Personal Finance Society doing to actively encourage more women into the financial planning profession?
I think, there's a couple of key initiatives, I think, around this. And one, and it's not specifically female focused, but is the Aspire apprenticeship program. So creating as many avenues as possible into the profession, rather than necessarily just graduate schemes, for example. And then supporting other key initiatives. More recently, it's been now supporting the Next Gen Planners Bootcamp initiative, the We Are Verve initiative around people retraining in the profession. And also not so much to encourage people into the profession, but also the mentoring program, I think, is really key. And the e-mentoring platform that's available through the PFAS, so that people can kind of hook up and find a mentor that is maybe going to be able to help them. Because I think that is the other element that is really important, is being able to have an environment, a trusted environment in which you can share your experiences and get feedback. Because one thing that I've always been a strong believer of is, as long as it's constructive, then feedback is really good, and we can learn from feedback. But if you haven't got that environment, whether it is with colleagues or peers or outside of that work, that the business that you're in, then you're really not going to necessarily learn and develop. You need that sort of guiding light to a certain extent. So I'd encourage people to look out for being mentored opportunities.
Definitely. I think having that person to bounce off of and, like you said, give feedback, and it makes a difference, and it makes positive change, definitely. So I mentioned at the start, you're one of the highest qualified financial planners in the UK, which is amazing. So how has this positively impacted the work you do? And I also wanted to ask if you did have any tips or any advice for anyone doing it, because that does include me, and I would love to know.
I've always believed knowledge is power. That sounds really strange to a certain extent, but actually, to be able to help our clients, we need the knowledge. I was one of the first chartered financial planners when they introduced that designation, but I've kept on going. So as exams changed or legislation's changed, I have done kind of more exams, and I've done the certified financial planner. I've also done George Kinder's registered life planner, and all of it for me, and I've done some of the step qualifications. It's all about making up the bigger jigsaw of kind of what I understand and how I can then impart that knowledge by helping clients. But I think one of the biggest things and the biggest tips that I would kind of give is that knowledge only gets you so far. We all know sitting and reading exam textbooks is pretty dry sometimes, but it's how you then learn to apply that knowledge to help your clients. And obviously, the more knowledge you can have by sitting exams, then and not just exams, doing qualifications of some shape or form, then obviously the more interesting dialogue and the ways in which you can help your clients and your colleagues to a certain extent as well.
Yeah, and I think I remember I did one exam, and before I joined an advice firm, and I joined the advice firm, and I thought, I've got an exam, I know what I'm talking about. I had no idea, I think. But when I started taking those little bits of knowledge from the book and actually processing an ISA or doing a fund switch, it all started to sort of come into place. And even now, as I do my more technical exams, if I read something about a trust in a book, I'm like, that really doesn't make a lot of sense. But as soon as we have a client that's got a case, yeah, and you see it in action, you think, oh, that's all falls into place now. It all makes sense.
And I think that's a really important aspect, is making sure that each time you sit an exam, you're in an environment, or there's a way in which you can apply that knowledge, rather than, yes, people are focused on, getting to level 6 or at least getting level 4 and then going on. But actually, to be really the best that you can be, you need to take the steps to be able to apply the knowledge that you're learning each time that you're doing those exams. Otherwise, it just becomes this big mix of knowledge, but it's how you then convey that is kind of the power that I refer to.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are coming to the end now, but Sarah, I would like to ask you for a book or podcast recommendation that you think our audience might find inspiring, please.
I'm definitely a reader rather than a listener, and I enjoy reading throughout my career. So there's loads of books that I could kind of recommend. But I think the biggest one relevant to this audience and relevant to the conversation that we've been having is The Confidence Code by Katty Kay and Claire Shipman. And it's a book around kind of females and confidence. And it gives kind of both the focus on the science of it, but also the art of that self-assurance and the relationship between kind of confidence, resilience, and ultimately that piece that we've just been talking about as well, that risk and reward element. So, for females starting out in the profession, for females that have been in the profession for a long time, I do think it's a great read, because confidence is one of the most important aspects, in my view, to success, or self-belief.
Yeah, I will definitely be buying that book, because I think anything like that in our jobs, what we do, I think is amazing. So thank you, Sarah. Sadly, that's all we have time for today. But I've really enjoyed speaking to you, Sarah, and I think there's loads of stuff there that our audience can take away. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good. Perfect. So, of course, thank you for our audience at home for watching, and join us next week at 1 p.m. to chat to another amazing woman in finance. If you'd like to keep informed about upcoming shows and get recordings of previous shows, please do sign up to our mailing list. Our producer will put a link to the mailing list in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and we will see you soon.